I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to Deniz and Pete. Deniz will be pulling in the questions from the Q&A and keeping this super insightful. So Pete, before Deniz tells us a little bit about himself, why don't you go ahead and kick things off?
Sure. Thank you, Savannah. Appreciate it. Hey, everyone. I'm Pete Kazanjy. I am the co-founder of Atrium. We make data-driven sales management software that helps sales managers, so AE, SDR, AM, CSM managers, use data and metrics to improve team performance. So we're kind of like the sales nerd squad, in short. Prior to this, starting this software company, I started another recruiting software company called TalentBin that was acquired by Monster Worldwide in 2014, and then subsequent to that, wrote a book on startup sales called Founding Sales. I'm also the founder of the Modern Sales Pros sales operations, leadership, and enablement community as well. So just a little thinking about sales stuff, just a bit here or there. And of course, we're joined by Deniz, who is going to introduce himself. Deniz.
Thanks, Pete. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Really pleasure to have you all on. I'm Senior Director of Product Marketing at Allego. We are a sales enablement platform, so we help equip reps with the best content to engage their buyers virtually. And we also train and coach them to become top performers. My background includes working in a door-to-door sales role. I've worked in sales training and consulting for a number of years. And most recently now, I work for a sales enablement company. So I've had a sales-centric background from the start. I'm really excited to share some of my experiences and perspectives with you all, and also have a great chat with Pete. So looking forward to our session today. And I have to mention, I know that Savannah mentioned your favorite concert. I am going to a Paul McCartney concert next week. I'm a big Beatles fan, so I'm really excited about that one. He's going to be in Boston next week, so really pumped about that.
Nice. What did you sell door to door?
I sold copiers, believe it or not, in the height of the recession.
Xerox?
The 2000 Canon. So I sold Canon copiers door to door in rural Massachusetts. It was a very humbling and difficult experience, but really, made me appreciate a lot of what goes into sales and how difficult it is. And I learned a lot from that experience, and happy to share some of our perspectives along the way. So we have a jam-packed session today, lots of practical advice and tips, free resources, as well as talking a little bit about the strategy. So it's going to be a good balance of tactics and strategy today.
Love it.
Before we get in, we all know that the world changed over the past 2 years, right? And I think the pace of digital transformation is not slowing down. So I thought it would be valuable for us to sort of ground ourselves collectively today about the 5 core truths about modern selling and buying, right? So the number one is that buyers want to be catered to with relevant experiences, and sellers are paramount in this, right? So it's not just software and technology. There's a huge people element to this as well. And this is where sellers can really help you differentiate from the pack. Number 2, right? Buyers want to be enabled to navigate more of the sales process on their own, right? Too often, they don't really want to talk to a rep until they're ready for it. There's tools, technologies, but also things that sellers can do to help accommodate this and differentiate in the sales process. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Third is sellers can and should be a crucial part of the buyer experience, right? We know that buyers want to do a lot of the research and stuff on their own, but there comes a point in time where the seller does add tremendous value and actually helps you differentiate your service or your product from the pack, right? So that's third. Fourth is sellers need enablement that's agile and works alongside them to meet buyer expectations. I like to give the analogy here of, you're a homeowner, right? Something breaks in your home. What do? You go on YouTube and learn how to fix it, right? You don't study everything there is to know about home ownership before you buy a home, right? So you need learning and enablement and training in the moment of need, right? When something happens during the sales process, me as a seller, I need to be able to find it easily. I need to be able to consume it quickly and not let it distract my day in the life as a seller. So that's really, really paramount to be successful. And finally, sellers who can create this relevant and self-navigable buyer experience are just simply more successful. right? So with these truths in mind and with these grounding principles in mind, we'll talk a little bit about both data, technology, and also simple tips that you can insert into your day-to-day life as sales leaders, sales trainers, sales enablement professionals to help improve your team's performance. I'll pause there just for a moment, Pete. How do you react to some of these points?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that we think about constantly here at Atrium is less about the kind of like the seller enablement and more about like the managerial enablement of things. But I think a lot of the premises that you're talking about still apply, right? Like people want to be able, as a manager, as a leader, you want to be able to like get something in the moment, like, oh, I've got a question about this rep right here and how he is ramping, and I want to be able to like access that very quickly, as opposed to having to go hunt, like, go dive through some dashboards or like, file a Jira ticket against like sales operations or the data team or what have you. So I think a lot of what you're kind of talking about here really applies to managers and leaders as well, and as practitioners, as enablement practitioners or sales operations folks or sales leaders, we need to be mindful of like meeting our internal customer, if you will, the seller and the manager, where they are, and enable them to have access to these things in a seamless fashion.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Pete. And I think that's a good segue to the following slide, where I really want to ground all of us in the definition of sales enablement, right? When we think about modern sales enablement, it's really a unit of teams working together to help produce top performing reps, right? And that includes, to your point, sales managers to help coach and ensure collaboration and best practice sharing among their teams, right? Sales training professionals helping onboard new reps, get them to sell like A players quickly, right? Train them and educate them and reinforce learning. The marketing team, product marketing team, as well as sales training, rolling out new products and new messaging and new positioning on an ongoing basis, right? And then the marketing team managing that content and collateral, whether it's a slide deck, a brochure, right, a video, trying to maintain that library of assets so that sellers have access to what they need when they need it. And also this new paradigm of virtual selling, right? I think this was happening. Yeah. It's not necessarily something new, but it certainly has accelerated in the wake of the pandemic and all of us working as a hybrid or remote sales teams, right? Trying to engage, build rapport, and connect with our buyers in a virtual world has become much more important. It has been a challenge, but there's a lot of opportunity there. It's a great opportunity for you to collect more data about the engagement, about the conversation, and take that into your sales enablement program and improve rep performance and drive revenue. So lots of exciting things we're going to be talking about today. And I think we want to sort of double click on coaching first and talk briefly about that, right? How can we use data, analytics, and also learnings from coaching initiatives to help you drive more revenue for your organization, right? So a couple challenges in a virtual world like we talked about, right? This is a research study that we at Allego commissioned, and we learned a couple truths about how managers and leaders are struggling in the wake of the pandemic. And I'd love your thoughts on this, Peter. We'll go maybe one by one, right? Yep. So first one, 54% of sales leaders say they're less effective coaches because their teams went remote during COVID. So what are your thoughts on that, Pete?
Oh, totally. I mean, 100%, right? Like, I think a lot of us were attenuated to kind of like micro coaching moments. Like I'm sitting here on my sales floor right now. I have a bunch of reps around me. And so I think we were kind of used to, you hear somebody say something, the talk track's off, or like, maybe the objection handle was off or whatever. Very quickly, you're like, bing, maybe drop them a Post-it note, maybe have a little sidebar with them after their call, et cetera. All those things kind of evaporate. And so what that means, right, like that means that you can't stop doing coaching. You just have to figure out a new mechanism by which to like make that coaching more explicit. And it's an adjustment, and people are still learning how to do it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think, I always used to sit next to the sales team, the inside sales team, at awesome. my role. And, you forget how much you hear kind of anecdotally and informally, right? In that setting when everyone's in the same room. But now that we've all gone remote, how do you ensure that collaboration by not being in the same room. And you do have to rely on technology, but also making it sort of a priority in your mind and actively pursuing it, right? Otherwise, it's too easy for us to get, into the back-to-back-to-back meeting and not think about it, right? And again, this goes with the second data point here, right? 76% of sales leaders say not being physically present with their team has made it harder to observe and coach. And that's exactly what we're talking about, right?
Yeah, totally.
And I think the final point I'll make here before moving on to some tips around helping you coach better in this environment is that 80% of sales leaders say coaching is the difference between success and failure. But only 25% of them say their coaching has definitely gotten easier due to remote work, right? So I think everyone accepts the fact that coaching is important, but they're struggling to put it into practice in this new normal that we find ourselves, right? So what are some actionable tips we can give you all to help you perform better? If you're in a leadership role, if you're in a sales trainer enablement role, what are some tips you can put into practice right at the end of this presentation? Number one is share those best practices, right? So the ones that you are hearing anecdotally in the hallways as you're listening to others make calls, submit a short video, right, on how to handle an objection or a challenge or how to pitch. You can ask your teams to do this. I mean, we all have Zoom and collaboration tools that are at our disposal, right? Ask your teams proactively to record a 1 to 2 minute video or a snippet. Pick the one that's best and start building a library, right? And I think this is going to help also onboard new reps. Because think of how challenging it is for a new rep to onboard in this virtual environment, right? That they can't really shadow anyone, they can't listen to anyone. They're sort of in their house and a victim of their scheduling. So it's really helpful for you to build a library where whether it's a new SDR or a rep, they can quickly look at how the best people are pitching it and make it their own.
Yeah.
Right. Any thoughts on this one, Pete?
Totally. One of the things that we really like to do, it's like use the virtual nature of like selling to your advantage. So like at this point, everybody's like recording all their sales calls, right? Whether you're using, I can't remember, does Allego have a call recording solution as part of its enablement?
Yep.
Yeah, there you go, right? It's like everyone's got a calls being recorded, right? So like when something good happens, especially like if you're a manager and you're on a call with a rep and like you're live with them, and like something really good happens, that rep is going to do their, like they're going to continue to sell, et cetera. And then like they're going to execute that follow-up. What you should do is you should dive into that call, clip that bad boy, and then like jam that off to Slack really quickly, or Microsoft Teams or what have you. And so what you're doing right there is like syndicating that best practice right there when it happened in the moment, such that like all the other people who couldn't sit next to that person on the sales floor now sees, oh, okay, cool. So even just like doing that and like manufacturing those hyperlinks, like those share links, is very powerful. Even if the basic version of it is like literally just like jamming it into the sales team's Slack channel or whatever. Obviously, the more advanced version of that is like populating a dictionary of them or what have you, like Dennis was saying earlier. But even just like making sure that like you as a manager or like an enablement person is like you should KPI yourself on like how frequently you're kind of like sending those things out. Like we do this, we have a kudos feed in Slack. We also do these things into like different ones at different places. So definitely like you want to be like syndicating those links as much as possible.
Absolutely. I think, as sales managers and leaders, it's sort of incumbent on us to be the connector in this new world that we live in, right? And make that bridge and tie that bridge together with video and tools at our disposal. Second one is practice new knowledge, right? It's really important to immediately put new product knowledge or new messaging into practice by asking your reps to apply learning into their opportunity planning, right? So as soon as a new training takes place, new enablement takes place, it's really important for you to help your reps put it into practice, because that drives retention, right? So there's research out there that says, 2 cohorts, 14-day long study versus 7 days of study and 7 days of practice. The second cohort that practices retains the knowledge much better and can deliver it much more effectively, right? So ask them to think about how to apply that new knowledge for a specific opportunity that they're working on, right?
Yeah.
Third one is always be improving. This one sort of goes with the first one, but don't rest on your laurels, right? Ask your reps to submit a video on how they deliver their elevator pitch, review collectively in team meetings and always be improving, right? Don't take it for granted that one pitch that worked, 6 months ago is still going to hold true. We live in a very dynamic and changing and evolving environment. And I'm sure we all face our own individual competitive pressures in the market as well. So your messaging always has to be improving, and you need to be driving that as a sales leader. Fourth one is know your market, right? This is another critical aspect that actually influences how you should be messaging and coaching, right? So task your reps to share their insights and learnings about the competition in a short video, and build a library for your new reps to ramp faster, right? So you can uncover so much intelligence in some of these conversations, whether it's competitive pricing, competitive messaging, right? Competitive feature functionality, right? And how they're positioning themselves. And this is really invaluable information that often just gets lost, right? In this virtual environment that we're living in. I mean, calls are being recorded, but we need to extract that intelligence and be able to disseminate it across our teams and coach them to perform better. And finally, I think this one always goes overlooked, but give written feedback, right? I think
definitely
too often it's so easy to just jump on a call and mention something, but if you can create a checklist that's built around your desired behavior, what you want your reps to do in a conversation, write it down, have them observe it, and score them against it, you'd be surprised at how quickly behaviors change. Right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And also what's really important about that is it memorializes it. So it's not just like ephemeral. One of my favorite books on the topic is by Corey Bray and Hillman Story. It's called 5 Secrets of the Sales Coach. And one of the things that they talk about in their kind of coach framework is the importance of like documentation and kind of like next steps. It's like I was having this I had this webinar the other day with the VP of Sales Enablement from CB Insights, this woman named Terry Long, and we were talking about how like great management is very similar to like great sales, and so it's almost like a mutual plan document with your rep, right? It's just like, hey, here's the situation, here's the pain point that we're trying to solve, here's the negative implications associated with it, here's the positive benefits of like change, like why change, why now, and then what are specific actions that we're going to take there. If that stuff's ephemeral and like spoken, it's tough, right? The same way like a mutual plan, like great mutual plan software allows you to like have that stuff documented as opposed to like some ungodly like email thread back and forth, right? So yeah, taking the time, like you have that coaching conversation because like having a verbal conversation is really important to kind of like give the nuances of it and like, deliver feedback in a friendly way, right? That is like easier as opposed to like written, which always kind of comes off, more strenuously. But then you have to document it after the fact to like pin down that, that feedback, because otherwise it might be ephemeral.
Absolutely. Yeah. And again, you don't need to buy software or technology to do this. You can start small, right? See if it works for you. And you'll be collecting a lot of data from that, right? And then if you want to scale it and take it to the next level, there's certainly solutions that can help you do that. Absolutely.
Yep. Yeah, 100%.
Pete, do you want to take this one and give your opinion on how to tackle coaching?
Yeah, like I think the one of the things that is important in coaching is, so all the stuff that we just that Deniz just went through is really important. But then a really big thing that you have to make sure that you're doing is like looping back again. And so this is there's a book I really like. It's called Boyd. It's about this guy who kind of innovated modern dogfighting and like jet fighter doctrine, and it's really one of the key insights from the book, which has kind of made its way into startups and kind of other things, is this idea of the OODA loop: observe, orient, decide, and act. And so the important thing here is like but importantly, it's a loop, right? So what you do is you observe the situation, what's going on, you make a judgment about it, right? You kind of orient with it and say, okay, I'm realizing that this rep has a bookings problem, and it seems like it's coming from a win rate problem, right? And moreover, it seems like it's coming from a conversion rate out of proposal as compared to his peers. We need to coach on that right there. I'm going to act on that. I'm going to coach on that, right? Hey, these are the steps that we're going to take here. It's the written feedback we were talking about earlier. But then what you have to do is you have to loop back again in whatever the appropriate time period is. Maybe it's 2 weeks or what have you. And then say, has that changed? Has that metric changed, right? Whether it's like, hey, I'm observing that you have a pipeline hygiene problem. I think it's because you're overloaded with respect to too many opportunities. What I want you to do is I want you to schedule 3 hours on your calendar to clean out all this old bullshit, right? And I also want you to have a recurring 2-hour meeting invite for yourself on Mondays to make sure you're touching up all your ops and making sure and we're going to measure that by the number of untouched opportunities that are in your pipe. And then we're going to come back in 2 weeks and I'm going to inspect what that untouched ops count looks like, right? And what that and kind of what that pipe hygiene looks like. I'm going to loop back again. And then when you show up again, like you now observe, you're like, oh, look, all the untouched ops are gone. Wonderful, high five. We get to move on to something else. Or alternatively, I'm going to observe again and be like, uh-oh, those untouched ops are still problematic. Seems like we need to prescribe a different solution here, right? So it's important to loop. And so if you go to the next slide here, one of the things, this kind of shows you what the difference can look like when you're using data versus not having data in driving that OODA loop in management. So I think a lot of people are probably familiar with this experience on the left here, where it's like, you don't really see something until it's too late. A rep has a bookings problem that kind of like smacks you in the face, like in the QBRs at the end of the quarter, as opposed to like catching it 45 days ahead of time or 60 days ahead of time. When you try to dig in and figure out what the root cause was, it's tough for you to be able to do so. It's really just kind of like hypotheses. Oftentimes, if you don't have that data, you can feel like bad, where you're like, oh, I think that maybe this is this issue, but like I don't have proof. So I kind of feel bad at like saying, hey, you have a pipeline hygiene problem or you have an activity problem or what have you. And so as a result, it's tough for you to act. And so when you have more data involved with that, it kind of unlocks a lot of that. It's more like, oh, I see this issue over here. I see that you have an untouched opportunities problem because I already have that KPI available to me. Next, I'm going to dig into what the issue is there. Oh, is it because you have too many ops? No, you have the same ops as everybody else. Oh, is it because your activity is low? Yes, it is. It looks like your activity is much lower than everybody else. That's weird. What's going on there, right? Oh, I'm going to look on your calendar. It looks like you're overloaded with internal meetings. Well, of course you don't have any time to work your pipeline. Geez Louise, right? Let's go ahead and get rid of those internal meetings and dial that back and let's fix this. Right. So that's why coaching and driving that kind of OODA loop using data is way more effective than doing it in an absence of data.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's where software can come into play and help, right? The observation piece where, you as a leader or a manager don't have to go in and try to fish for information, where you can set your parameters, get alerted, and even automate some of the actions, right? And I think, all of us here can start small and test that hypothesis and whether it's going to work for us on a small scale. And if it does, that's when you can start investigating solutions and what that fits in your stack.
Yeah. And so a great place to implement this coaching, if you want to flip to the next slide here, Dennis, is like the old one-on-one, right? The old one-on-one. And one of the problems that folks really encounter is they use the one-on-one for the wrong thing. Like the one-on-one is not for pipe review. Pipe review is for pipe review. Have a deal strategy meeting that focuses on inspecting opportunities and doing deal strategy. That's okay. That's really important, right? That is not the place to be doing skills-based coaching or behavioral coaching. And one of the jokes we talk about in our organization is calendar is destiny. Right? If you don't have it on the calendar, you don't make space in the world for it. It's not like it ain't going to happen. And like don't worry. No sales rep and no sales manager needs encouragement doing more deal inspection. And it's like literally, it's like a moth to the flame. And so making sure that you have a good one-on-one cadence where the one-on-one is not focused on deal reviews, but instead focused on data-driven coaching and looking at whatever that topic might be, the pipeline hygiene thing we were talking about earlier, an activity problem, or maybe a prospecting initiative or whatever it is. Making sure that space is on the calendar is really important. And then again, looping it, right? You look at the asset that you have in place, maybe it's a dashboard, maybe it's, what have you, maybe it's a table of kind of related to that specific topic. Check it out. You discuss it with the rep. Great. We're going to agree on the action. And then we loop back again, right? Just OODA loops in the one-on-one. And so if you flip to the next slide here really quick, Dennis, what can come out of that is better coaching, right? So instead of having kind of crappy coaching, like, hey, what's up with this deal? Right. Instead, when you have data, you can show up and say, hey, what's concerning you about the Lockheed deal? I noticed that you're only engaged with 3 contacts there. Right. That's a data sentence. Right. Oh, can you make this forecast bigger? Like, that's not helpful. Hey, can you fake a bunch of ops? Can you enlarge these ops or pull these forward? Can you commit this thing that's not committable? Versus, hey, I'm noticing the forecast is pacing behind. Is there something we can pull forward? Or alternatively, if we're hosed, we're hosed. But maybe we can start thinking about how we can act to avoid this situation in the future, which might be a skills-based coaching. They're like, hey, your forecast is pacing behind because you lost a bunch of stuff or pushed out a bunch of stuff. Why was that? Oh, because of like crappy disco 45 days ago, 60 days ago, right? And so what you want to be is you want to be in the right column. You don't want to be in the left column.
Absolutely. And I think that's really where it's powerful to use that data to your advantage to kind of remind you and prompt you to have the right conversations in private and in those one-on-one situations, right? Like you mentioned, some of those deal review general questions can be done in a group setting, right? Don't waste your one-on-one time to talk about those things that you can talk about with your broader group present, right?
Totally.
So as part of our value add for this session, I wanted to make sure everyone was aware that we'll be giving away a discovery call coaching checklist. We'll give you a QR code at the end. And again, this goes back to what Pete and I have been saying from the start, right? To sort of document and write down the intended activities and behaviors you want your reps to exhibit, right? Score your reps against that. And use that private time to talk about how they can improve their rapport building, their needs discovery, their qualification, right? The way that they advocate for the solution or educate the customer to help them realize that they actually need the solution, right? So you can start to really build the intended outcomes you want your reps to drive, right? And start coaching against that, collecting feedback against that, and really collectively improving your team's performance, right? And again, this is something that software can also automate, right? Conversation intelligence software, for instance, can actually listen for how reps are leading conversations and help you quickly review those calls and score, whether they're on a 1 to 5 scale or 1 to 10 scale or whatever you want. And now you're really collecting data at scale, right? Where you can really analyze trends and see how reps are sort of leading the sales conversation from start to end. Like Pete mentioned, right? Maybe they're not engaging all the buyers, right? Maybe they're not, creating activities fast enough, right? Or maybe they're not talking about all the right use cases, right? Maybe they're a one-trick pony. Hey, I know how to sell this widget. I'm not going to talk about all the other new widgets that I have in the truck. I mean, we've all probably seen that at some point in our careers, right? So there's mountains of data that you can use to make your one-on-ones and your coaching efforts more specific, rather than generalizations like, hey, can you make your forecast bigger, right? Hey, is this deal coming in? That's not coaching, right?
No, one of the things that we like to talk about here at Atrium is the idea of, you hear it in our tagline, right? Like, help managers use data to improve rep performance, because that's our job, right? Like, your job as a manager, your job is not like to close deals for people. Your job is to improve the rep, right? As a coach, and so the way to do that is to like upskill them on it's not on a deal by deal basis. Like, oh, you should do this thing right here. It's like across all your deals. Notice how you're only asking these 2 disco questions, but they're like on the script. There's 5. Right, like you're literally fighting with one hand tied behind your back. Let's go ahead. What I want you to do is I want you to record yourself doing disco with yourself, like where you play both sides of the conversation. I want you to record 5 sessions of those, and I want you to send them to me. And I want you to laboriously go through methodically, just vamp it up like crazy, right? Like you're a Broadway actor. I want you to do each of those disco questions, because then it's going to groove your brain, right? It's going to groove your tongue, and you're going to be so much more prone to do it when we get in, like when you actually get into a discovery conversation, that marketing is put on your calendar, because marketing's gonna be really happy with you that you're actually doing a good job with your with the ops that are being provided, right? As opposed to kind of half-assing them.
Absolutely. And I think it's interesting, Peter, I'd like your perspective on this too, but I almost feel like data can actually help build a culture of coaching and learning, right? Because I think for some organizations that I've been a part of, this openness and transparency is not really a thing, right? There's a certain discomfort to it, right? And I think as leaders in either enablement, training, or sales, it's incumbent on us to lead by example and really build that culture of learning and coaching, right? So it's almost like we need to train our teams to be comfortable being uncomfortable a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Because it's going to take time, right? I mean, this isn't easy for all organizations, culturally speaking.
Yeah, totally. And I think, honestly, it's funny. There's like this weird overhang or like cultural like legacy of it's almost like in professional roles, people feel that they can't be coached, or like it impeaches their like capacity or their professionalism, whatever, which is like obviously bananas, right? Because like you're in Boston, I imagine you must be a Patriots fan, right? Yeah. like Tom Brady comes off the field, right? Tom Brady's pretty good at football. I mean, I know that he's in Tampa Bay now, but you get my point. Like he's pretty good at what he does, right? He comes off the field, and like what happens? Is there like, oh, okay, good job, Tom, like you're fine, like you're the man, or whatever? No, immediately like comes and sits down next to Bill Belichick or whoever else, and they're like looking at like went down with the plays, what was good, what was not good, et cetera, et cetera. Tom Brady gets pissed off and throws the Microsoft Surface or whatever. But like this is Tom Brady being coached, like the best quarterback playing right now, being coached real time. And so I think like how can we get that behavior okay in organizations versus like, oh, that's micromanagement. Are you kidding me? That's what's happening right there? Bill Belichick is micromanaging Tom Brady? Is that what's going on right there? Absolutely not. And I think that like there's a cultural shift that's going on. Now, I do get that historically, because the data that was available was like so sparse, oftentimes like it was like used poorly, like, oh, do more dials. Like, by the way, doing more activity is a good thing, generally speaking, but like obviously there's so many other metrics to pay attention to. So that's the first thing. And I think the second thing is that it's just kind of new. The good news is that especially with like, I don't know, guys our age, you're a little bit younger than me, but like, and kind of managers and reps that are, in their 20s and their 30s, maybe in their early 40s, they grew up on Fitbit and Peloton and Whoop and like Apple Fitness and Strava and so on and so forth. So like there's more of that kind of like in the water, so to speak. And so I think that like the time is really ripe to take advantage of this, right? And like, and like, hey, like, on the slide previously, like the coaching versus not coaching thing, it's not like, hey, I'm showing up here and I'm telling you need to do more activity because I'm the big bad wolf. It's, look, I'm literally looking at this right here. We have like 30 reps on our team and you have like 30% fewer customer facing meetings than everybody else. This is not because I'm the big bad wolf. Like this is literally just the data right here. And like, I want to help you with this. Right. But like, let's not pretend that I'm like doing this to be mean. And so by bringing data into those conversations, it kind of like unblocks the like managerial colonic blockage associated with like actually having being able to have performance conversations versus kind of like being squeamish about it. Like, oh, I don't know if I want to like have that coaching conversation because like what if they think I'm bad? It's like right here, like it's not me. Like here's the data. Like look at all these untouched ops, not me, right?
Exactly. It makes it more tangible and real, right? And I mean, I'm of the mindset that the best time to improve your game is when you're at the top of your game, right? So this goes for top performers, low performers or new hires, right? Everyone has an opportunity to improve.
Yeah. And then what's especially rad about top performers is what you can do is you can use the data that indicates exactly what it is that they're doing right to then broadcast that to everybody else, to like syndicate it to all the other reps, right? Like, oh, the reason why this batter is like lighting up this, this pitcher right here is because he's taking the first couple pitches and getting deeper in the count, right? Hey, everybody else, let's do that. right? Or the reason why this rep is having so much success is, did you see, like, he does a really good job of pre-call planning, and he builds amazing rapport within 5 minutes by making sure that he's pulling something off their LinkedIn profile to talk about, as opposed to the goddamn weather, right? And so instantly he's like turbo creating rapport, which then makes for a permission-based, like, discovery conversation where you can elicit a lot more pain. Can we get everybody else doing that? Everyone else is going to have way better disco conversations, which of course is going to raise the win rate across the team.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And there's, in terms of the data that you can collect from, sales opportunities and motions, I mean, we talked a little bit about, activities with different buyers, opportunity sizes, all that kind of stuff. You can actually now dig deeper into each conversation as well and lift a lot of metrics that can help you coach better, and that can help you change behaviors on your team through conversation intelligence, right? So we talked a little bit about all calls are recorded, but not all calls are necessarily extracted for the intelligence and insight that they actually have, right? Too often they just sit on a drive somewhere. But what we can actually do now is measure the topics that are being talked about, measure how reps are actually articulating key value points, and measure their proficiency and change in proficiency over time, right? So a new rep comes on board. Maybe they talk about the widget in a very elementary way, but over time you can actually measure the progress and prove their improvement and correlate that to how they're producing, more revenue and more pipe, right? Second is mix of use cases. We talked about this, right? Sort of the one trick pony, right? So you can actually tag different phrases or conversation elements and say, okay, if I'm only talking about these two words, I'm probably selling this one widget versus the other, right? Or this one service or the other. So now you can actually start to measure if which part of your reps are sort of focused on the old product or one product that they're comfortable with versus others. And that can drive your coaching, right? And that can drive your training to kind of tailor based on what you're capturing in those conversations. And again, we talked about this one, but deal activity, right? So how are they interacting with the buying committee? Are they asking questions, right? How often are they talking versus listening? I mean, a lot of stuff you can use to collect from those individual conversations and calls and then feed it back into your coaching program. Pete, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think what this is, one of the things that we like to talk about is how to use the combination of metrics to allow you to figure out where a potential issue might be. And so an important to then coach on, and so an important thing to think about is you have metrics that are essentially drive into the downstream metrics. So I'll give you an example here. This is the revenue formula here. So a rep's bookings counts are going to come from their wins crossed by their ASP, crossed by their average deal cycle. And then, of course, their wins are going to come from their win rates crossed by attempts, right? And so what can happen is that and then upstream of that, you have kind of more behavioral things or kind of more qualitative things, like where does win rate come from? Well, it comes from a variety of things. Are you multi-threading well? Are you engaging a high number of contacts in an account or in an opportunity? Are you doing a good job with converting out of the various stages, what have you? And so what you can do when you're analyzing what's going on with a rep is you can kind of start with where the issue is, where you observe the issue, and you can kind of go right. You can say, hey, is this bookings problem the result of too few wins or too low of an ASP, right? Or is the deal cycle along it? Oh, it's coming from too few wins. Oh, okay. Where is that coming from? Is that because the win rate is off as compared to their peers, or has deteriorated as compared to their performance historically? Or is it because they're just like not getting enough at bats? Oh, they're not getting enough at bats. Okay, we can fix that, right? Maybe they need to prospect more. Maybe we need to have them maybe we need to prioritize them on the round robin. Or alternatively, is it a win rate problem? Okay, well then let's diagnose where the behavioral issue is there. Then specifically what we can potentially do is see where things are falling out of the pipe from an opportunity conversion standpoint. And so like by kind of going right, if you will, you can end up kind of revealing where that issue is. And then if you go to the next slide, you can do the same thing in SDR land as well from a pipeline generation standpoint.
Yeah, it's a great diagnosis discovery decision tree, I'll say, right? Diagnosis a decision tree of sorts, right? To your point, you have a specific area where you think there's a problem, go right, and then start to uncover what are the different levers you can pull and push to rectify the problem. And again, ultimately, changing these will impact your revenue and top line.
Yep, exactly.
Great. So that was a great meaty discussion on coaching, right? I wanted to segue and shift the conversation to what can we do in the virtual selling world, right? What kind of data can we collect and how can we use that to our advantage to drive revenue? A concept that's emerging in this new virtual world that we find ourselves in is as a digital sales room, right? And I like to think of this as a website that's tailored for a specific account or opportunity created by the seller, right? So it's a central hub where sellers and buyers can communicate, share content and proposals, and generally just align and progress the deal further, right? We talked about the 5 core modern truths about selling and buying. Creating a self-navigable experience, check, right? Being able to discover and learn on my own, check, right? Making it convenient, absolutely, right? You can put your proposal, your pricing, everything on here so that the buyer really doesn't have to sift through and figure out through their email or, hey, where was that one correspondence I had with my rep? You can centralize everything here in a deal room of sorts, right? And you can also chat and talk to your customers. And this is really, really important in the new virtual world we find ourselves in, because you can actually start to collect data on content consumption, right? What are the different content items that the buyers are looking at? How long are they spending on those content items? And it also gives your sellers a way to guide the sales process from prospect to close, right? One of the things that we do here at Allego that I wanted to share is actually map our virtual sales process front to end with all the expectations that we have from our sales folks, right? And you can almost imagine creating a version for your own organization, right? So from generating interest on the far left, what do you need to know, right? Your target accounts, the industry background, the buyer personas, maybe the prospecting emails, account planning template. And we talk about the concept of backstage and front stage interactions in virtual selling. Backstage is everything that happens as you prepare yourself for a live meeting, right? Front stage is when you're actually live on a Zoom call with someone and interacting. And then backstage again can be the follow-up that happens after that meeting that's live with the prospect, right? So you can map all the individual activities or the outcomes you want your sellers to drive in these different subsequent meetings as you're moving deeper in the funnel, right? And mapping the right resources, the right activities. And obviously these digital sales rooms can help centralize and coordinate all this activity for your sellers. So for everyone on this call, we'll be sending out a template that you can tailor and make your own, right? So you can set the expectations with your own sales team. What do you want them to do before they go into a meeting? What do you want them to do during the meeting? And then quickly following up after the meeting, right? Because being prescriptive and documenting and really showing your reps what you want them to do is the first step to success. And it can really help you get a lot of learnings to help improve your process over time. So we'll be sharing this at the end of the presentation.
Love it.
Do you want to cover this one, Pete? The 4 steps to managing a hybrid sales team?
Yeah, and I think that this is just kind of folds with the prior thing that you were talking about. Is in a virtual environment, obviously, like managing and orchestrating the deal like that, or deal behavior ends up being really important. The same is true with orchestrating and managing a rep, right? And so the kind of the thing I do a master class on managing hybrid sales teams, but really the high order bit is like when the sales floor disappears, what you got to do is you can't like look around the floor, like use your ears to kind of hear how things are going, if people are busy, et cetera. You got to use metrics as your eyes and ears. You got to set and track the right goals such that you make sure that people are progressing towards, and it can't just be like booking, like outputs goals, like bookings or opportunity creation or pipeline creation for SDRs. It's got to be the input goals as well, like activity goals, quality goals as well. Then you have to weave that into an operating rhythm, right? So the same way that you would have a good operating rhythm with respect to a deal, like ongoing touch points, making sure there's another meeting on the calendar. You got to have the same thing going with your sales team as well, right? So that means stand-ups, that means sales team meetings, it means deal strategy meetings, it means pipeline review meetings, and it means those one-on-ones. And then, of course, then you have to just do that OODA loop that we were talking about before, where you got to use all the above in 1, 2, 3 to detect potential issues or outperformance. Diagnose it, troubleshoot it, and then resolve it, and then loop back again.
Great. Thanks for covering that, Pete. I saw a good question come in. I figured we could pause and maybe take this one from Dwayne. He asks, what about the data used pre-sales to ensure that at-bats have the highest probability of success, right? So basically, the data used to help you inform your targeting and prospecting efforts, I believe, is what Dwayne is asking for. He says, in many cases, the root of the problem may be the prospect target lists vary, right? Again, what's your take on this, Pete? And I'll add my comment as well afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, I think the way that I would answer this question is it always depends, right? It depends on where the problem is going to be dependent on the rep or the sales motion or whatever, and the way that you're going to be able to zoom into where that actual problem is by using data in order to say, oh, okay, as an example, right? If somebody's having a win rate problem, right, to use Dwayne's example here, and their win rate is dramatically off as compared to their peers, well, then what we would want to understand is where are the things falling out of the pipe? Are they falling out at proposal or in kind of contract out, or are they falling out the top of the funnel? If they're falling out at the top of the funnel, well, that might indicate that all these inbound ops or op inflows being qualled out. Well, that might indicate a targeting issue, right? Or these folks are not meeting minimum quality and minimum targeting quality. So it really kind of depends on where, it's going to depend, and the way that you understand where the issue is you have to use data in order to understand that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll add to that and just say data isn't a silver bullet, right? I mean, I know that you can use intent data, technology data, intent, the profile of the prospect and their title and their account fit and all that kind of stuff. At the end of the day, that's going to get you a meeting. The real difference is going to be what that salesperson does to shepherd the conversation and lead the deal to close. And I think that's where you can really extract some insights about how you can improve your deal performance. At the end of the day, data is going to help you make the connection, but it's not going to help you really close, right? So with that, we'll go to the next slide and talk a little bit about the content side of things, right? So we talked about coaching data, we talked about virtual selling, managing hybrid teams, and the data you can extract from that. What about from the content that you're producing, right? So let's maybe double click on that as the final segment of our presentation today. Leading with some research that we've conducted recently. These were quite eye-opening for me, right? 2/3 of marketing content goes unused according to Serious Decisions, right? 55% of marketers don't know which asset sales uses most. And 1/3 of marketing and sales teams don't talk regularly, right? So we talked about sales, marketing, enablement, training, leadership being one unit, but clearly there's a disconnect here, right? And I think content is one of the most powerful ways in which a seller and a rep can deliver a message, right? And we need to make sure that we're optimizing that content and arming them with the right content to make sure that they can confidently close deals. So listing off a couple tips here, would love your input on some of this, Pete, as well. But I think one of the first ones is aligning your content to your go-to-market, right? So making sure that you're surfacing the right content and collateral and tools aligned with your sales process, right? So what should they be using in prospecting? What should they be using when they're doing a demonstration? What should they be using when they're negotiating, for instance, right? So I think aligning your key content or your top impact content through those phases will really help your reps simplify their go-to-market motion and be able to deliver those messages with better confidence. Second one is prescribing the best content, right? I think most organizations end up after many years having a library of dated, right, inaccurate, and just simply old content, right? And I think why not prescribe and recommend your best bet assets, right? So take a focus session where you cull the list, you focus on your top producing assets, and you really create a cheat sheet for your reps to be able to showcase what's most important for their go-to-market. That's another tip. Third, collaborate with sellers, right? So be transparent about your goal of improving and fostering communication, and don't create content in a vacuum. One of the things that we did at Allego is create a sales advisory board. So we meet regularly with some of our top performing reps, and we get input from them about what's really important to them and what will help them close deals. And we use that to inform our content creation strategy, right? So that's the data that we're collecting from our teams to be able to optimize our content creation. Fourth is providing content with context, right? So pairing your content with how you intend for it to be used, right? So you can activate content by pairing it with best practice messaging, talk tracks, maybe showing how a piece of content helped influence the win story, right? All of this can help make your content strategy more effective. And finally, measuring impact, right? So how is your content actually influencing win rates, your ASP, your at-bats, right? So technology can help do this by tying into your CRM data and mapping how your content is actually being actively served during the sales cycle. But you can also anecdotally collect information from your reps to try to measure impact and performance as well. Any tips on this, Pete? Anything you'd like to share? Any perspective?
I mean, I used to be a product marketer back in the day, but I'm not super close to the content distribution stuff. I think the biggest thing is just really making sure that reps, like, that things are easily available to the reps so they can, because you know how reps are, right? Like they're just like running from like meeting to meeting to meeting. And so just making sure that it's like easy for them to jump onto the slide deck that they need to have for that discovery conversation or what have you, in a couple of clicks ends up being really important. However you do that, with either with fancy software or just like, a Google document or what have you, to make it easy for folks to click to it.
Absolutely. Great segue to the next slide. Again, another resource that we'll provide each and every one of you on this call, but I just wanted to share one of the things that we did at Allego is map our key content, again, by awareness, consideration, decision, right? Making it really easy for the reps to understand what stage of the sales process they're in, and clearly marking external, look at that second row, right? External content, what can I actually share with a customer versus what's internal, right? What is more reference content for me to be able to have a better conversation, maybe do a competitive matrix, right? Maybe there's some product details that I need to check on the side. And really organizing it by type of content, right? Whether it's a video, a PDF, a case study, a digital sales room template, whatever it may be. And we've found that this really drives tremendous adoption and is loved by reps. So it's a great way to get started in your guided selling and content strategy. Obviously, software can also automate a lot of this and make it easier, but you can get started with this, right? It can be really easy exercise of just mapping your key content and your best bet assets to the sales journey. So we'll share a template where you can modify this and make it your own, and we hope that you find value as being attendees today.
Love this. I love this this slide.
We'll send it to you too, Pete.
Thank you. I love sales tools. It's fantastic. That's really. I'm looking at that. I'm like, we need that for our reps. My marketers our marketing team's listening right now. They're like, oh, great, another asset. Great.
you just gave them another to do.
Well, I mean, except for the fact that like we have a bunch of like really amazing content. Like we have because we're such like a sales expertise organization, we have tons of content on various kind of pieces of data, on data-driven sales management, and so it can be a little overwhelming for reps to be able to like select the right thing at the right time. So anyway, Absolutely. That's a very good visualization that you had there. Yeah, and I think we have a couple of different offers here. One of the things that we really like to do here at Atrium is just raise everybody's game, if you will. And so one of the ways that we do that is we actually sponsor a sales management boot camp run by this delightful gentleman, Richard Harris, who is a renowned sales enablement speaker and coach and what have you. This one is specifically focused on sales management. So if you're a sales manager, so you manage AEs, you manage SDRs, you're a leader, you manage managers, this is you're welcome to attend this. Normally it would be $1,000 if you were renting Richard yourself, but in this case it's complimentary. It's covered by Atrium. And I think we're going to drop the hyperlink in the chat here. But again, it's for managers. So if you manage AEs, if you manage SDRs, if you manage managers, you're welcome to attend.
Excellent offer. Thank you for that, Pete. And on the Allego side, as I mentioned at the beginning, we're a sales enablement platform. We help equip the reps with the best content, give them the learning and the coaching they need to be their full potential, right? A couple of offers will provide this discovery call coaching checklists, great resource, handy tool for managers and coaches if they want to help them. If you want to help your reps be more successful during conversations, we'll share that content mapped to the go-to-market diagram that I just shared a moment ago. If you're a marketer, product marketer, it's a really simple way to organize your content and share it with your sales team. I guarantee they'll love it. And then that other resource we'll also send is the virtual selling process, right? So what are the activities, both front stage and backstage, that you can prescribe to your reps or your SDRs to help them make sure that they're leading consistent sales process from A to Z. So a lot of great value add that we're providing all of you. And before we wrap up, I think we can, Savannah, I'll kick it to you if there are questions or if you want to make some closing comments. Let's do that before we wrap up.
I think everything's good on my end. Pete, Dennis, are you good to go for us to kind of wrap things up to a good close?
Yeah, I think it was fantastic. Dennis,
okay,
Dennis,
cool.
you killed it. Way to go.
Let's do this again, Pete. It was fun.
Yeah, buddy. Thank you both. Thank you both for sharing your wonderful insight and all of these goodies. And look forward to next time. Thanks, everybody, for joining.